Hello, and today I'm going to review a new album from Roger Waters. His first album for 25 years. Came out on June the 2nd. Is this the life we really want? Delighted to have him back. Was beginning to lose hope that he'd ever record another album. Amused to Death was 1992, as I say, 25 years ago. And he'd only recorded two solo albums before, if you exclude the opera one. So hasn't been that prolific, but anyway, nice to have him back. And before we go through the music, the cover, minimalist. And Roger's never been that good at album covers. Amused to Death was about the best. Radio Chaos was pretty terrible, and Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking likewise, but Amused to Death was quite nice. And this one, well, I see what he's trying to say, kind of like in 1984 type fashion. The truth has been kind of wiped out and replaced by whatever they want us to hear, perhaps, or something like that. But he doesn't just blame the establishment on this album, he actually blames everyone, every one of us, for the state we're in, which is quite refreshing, I suppose. So I haven't got the albums out here because it's quite a hot day here in Budapest, so these are the inner sleeves with the words, which are quite difficult to read in this red type, I have to say. A bit of a struggle. Same with the other disc. And then they made it into a double album on vinyl, although it's only 54 minutes, I think, so could have squeezed it onto a single album. Musicianship, quite interesting. Not the usual crew who he plays with live, or not up until now anyway. Nigel Godrich is producing, interestingly enough. Radiohead producer, who'd also produced Chaos and Creation in the Backyard for Paul McCartney. And we have a new guitarist called Jonathan Wilson, who also plays keyboards, guitar and keyboards, and he is quite a revelation actually. He does some good stuff on this album, and Nigel Godrich's production is very warm and lush. And then we have Joey Waronker on drums, Roger Manning on keyboards, Lee Pardini on keyboards, and a guy called Lucius on vocals. And then Roger is also playing vocals, acoustic and bass. Actually the sun's gone in, so I can show you one of the vinyls. Bit of dirt on here, sorry. So yeah, picked it up in the UK just the weekend before last, and a copy for myself and a copy for my son Richie. So this album debuted at, I think it was number 3 in the UK and number 11 in the US, and even read number 8 in Hungary. And perhaps if I had bought my 2 copies here instead of in London, that might have been even higher. But so I told you about the musicians. So no Andy Fairweather Lowe, no Jeff Beck or Eric Clapton or anyone like that. So kind of relatively unknown musicians playing with Roger, apart from the producer Nigel Godrich. So this album was a long time in the making, as you would expect after 25 years. I think you started thinking about it in 2010 and debuted the song Deja Vu a few years ago in concert, and I think Broken Bones was also debuted in concert a few years ago. So it doesn't necessarily mean the album is disjointed. It actually flows pretty well because of Nigel Godrich's production, I think. It's very evocative of the post-Dark Side of the Moon Pink Floyd sound, particularly Animals on the Wall, various sound effects going on throughout the album. And you know, if people have a problem with that, that's a bit sad, because Roger really hasn't used that tactic on previous solo albums. He's always completely produced his own sound, maybe to his own detriment commercially, but here he allows Nigel Godrich to use Pink Floyd trademarks such as dogs barking and sort of familiar guitar sounds and stuff, spoken voices. And there's nothing wrong with that. If anyone can sound like Pink Floyd, it's certainly Roger Waters or Dave Gilmour if he wants to. So I don't have a problem with that. In fact, it actually makes this album probably the most accessible of his career, solo career. In my mind, I'm still trying to decide whether it's better than Amused to Death. I'm not sure if it is. Certainly more accessible, as I say, and the highlights on here are as good as anything on Amused to Death, but I have a sneaking suspicion that when the dust settles, Amused to Death will still be his best solo album, but I don't know. The jury's out still on that one. But I think for sure we can agree that this one is better than the first two, Hitchhiking and Radio Chaos. It's a very long album, perhaps a bit overly long, because if you want to listen to this album, it's not the kind of thing you dip into or put it on while you're ironing or something. It really demands your full attention. The lyrics are kind of in your face, and as usual with Roger, doesn't pull any punches, and makes for a slightly depressing listen, I suppose, but also good to have him back. And he's always been consistent. He's always railed against the establishment and railed against greed and all the rest of it, so you wouldn't expect him to come back all optimistic and happy, and that's not the case here. So it's the Roger we know and love, and let's go through the tracks. It opens with When We Were Young, which is a spoken track with Roger is reminiscing about his childhood, and it's quite amusing, about teasing each other about you're ugly and you're still fat and you've got spots and stuff. I don't think Roger's childhood was very happy, as we know from The Wall, but this is quite amusing, quite an interesting listen. Doesn't go on too long. As I say, a bit reminiscent of Speak to Me from Dark Side of the Moon in that respect. Spoken word. Deja Vu is a very strong track, and there's a video he produced for this, and just wrote some of the words. Uses some humour, which is probably lacking in Roger's work in general, his solo work in particular. But the first line of Deja Vu: if I had been God, I would have rearranged the veins in the face to make them more resistant to alcohol and less prone to aging. If I had been God, I would have sired many sons, and I would not have suffered the Romans to kill even one of them. And then later on, the temple's in ruins, the bankers get fat, the buffalo's gone, and the mountain top's flat. The trouts in the streams are all hermaphrodite. You lean to the left, but you vote to the right. I think that's some pretty perceptive lyrics, and as I say, humour in the first verse. Interestingly, God is spelt with a small g. No doubt to make a point from Roger there. Don't think he's the most religious person in the world. And on Amused to Death, it opened with what God wants, God gets anyway, or something like that. So similar type song, I suppose, but as I say, more humorous in this instance, and probably more affecting. The Last Refugee is next, and again, a video was done, a nice video with a young female refugee in the video. Nice, very, very affecting words and nice melody. An acoustic number, this one, which closes side one. It's quite a short side one. I really think they probably could have fit this onto a single album, but I don't mind it being on a double album. I really don't. Picture That is next, not to be confused with Picture This from Blondie. A very different song. And I guess the highlight of the song is, which is the one which has been quoted in all the reviews: picture a courthouse with no king laws, picture a cat house with no king whores. Picture a shithouse with no king drains. Picture a leader with no king brains. Don't think we have too much difficulty knowing who Roger is referring to in particular, but as I said in earlier reviews, I think it's better that he keeps it generic and doesn't mention anyone by name, because that means in 20, 30, 40 years you can listen to this song and it might have the same impact as it does now. And I said the same about Animals. So I feel that, you know, he's obviously referring to Trump, but Trump's voice actually appears on one of the tracks. His sort of no chaos remarks at the beginning of his presidency, but only as a kind of sort of spoken vocal. He doesn't mention him by name. So, and then we've got Broken Bones, which is a nice track about how it all went wrong after World War II. We could have taken the opportunity to rebuild the world, but instead we followed the American dream, which he's a bit scathing about. And it's a good track. It's bitter, twisted Roger, but it's none the worse for that. I like it. And then we move on to side C. Is this the life we really want? And I like this track a lot. He basically, as I said earlier, he blames the situation we're in on all of us, because it's a democracy and we get what we vote for, is his point. And then he lists all the people who he wants to blame it on: cleaning women, football stars, and blacks and whites, the old, the young, toothless hags, supermodels, actors, fags, bleeding hearts, men in bars, football stars, ants. Well, maybe not ants. Why not ants? Well, because it's true that ants don't have enough IQ to differentiate between the path that other people feel and, well, for instance, crawling across windowsills in search of open treacle tins. So, like the ants, are we just dumb? Asks Roger. And again, nice use of humour there. Never thought ants would find its way into a Roger Waters song, but it's used pretty effectively here. I like it. It's a good song. And then Bird in a Gale is a kind of experimental number where Godrich gets given his head in terms of production, and it's okay. It's not my favourite on the album, but it's quite effective. And then we got The Most Beautiful Girl in the World, where Roger is showing his tender melodic side to good effect, which closes side 3. And then side 4 opens with Smell the Roses. Wake up and smell the roses. I'm not sure if Roger realises that it's pretty close to a song written and recorded by Ringo Starr in 1981, which was called Stop and Smell the Roses. Not that there's any connection whatsoever between the two songs, but I just thought I'd point it out. You might think from the title that it's not going to be an optimistic song about, look on the bright side of life kind of thing, but not a bit of it really. I mean, he's railing at everyone in this song, as he is on the whole album. There's not much optimism here really. Wait for Her is again another tender song where he is showing a bit more vulnerability and humility. It's about as close to a love song in a way, but it's not really. I mean, Roger's never really written conventional love songs, but this is a nice track. And then we have a track called Oceans Apart, which is a bit forgettable, a kind of small linking number. And then Part of Me Died closes the album, where he's listing again all the people he wants to blame everything on. The part that is envious, cold-hearted and devious, greedy, mischievous, global, colonial, bloodthirsty, blind, mindless and cheap, focused on borders and slaughter and sheep, burning of books, bulldozing of homes, given to targeted killing with drones, lethal injections, at rest without trial. And then he goes on to say this line about what's the greatest crime of all, which is, I can't find it, but or maybe it's in a previous song. Silence and indifference is the greatest crime of all, in Roger's opinion. So it's better to have an opinion one way or the other than just to stand by and let things happen. And I think I agree with that. So that closes the album. As I say, quite good reviews. My own personal view is it's I wouldn't say a return to form because he's been away for 25 years, but great to have him back, and this is easily in his top 2 solo albums. It's just a question of whether it gets the nod ahead of Amused to Death, and at the moment I'm still trying to figure that out, but it's relatively fresh in my mind, so maybe I need a few months to kind of digest it, because there is a lot to digest on this album. But it's well produced, it's accessible to the old Pink Floyd fans who maybe didn't want to venture into Roger's solo career before. I think you can take a chance of this one. I think it's got some good stuff on it, lyrically as always, and musically it flows nicely as well, and there's some nice melodies and nice musicianship. So thank you for watching. See you next time.